record.
Should I start?
Yes.
Namaste, everyone. Good morning. Welcome to the series on Islam. And today's episode is the Prophet, his wife, her lover. The Prophet, of course, is the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. And the wife, who is the protagonist of today's episode, is his favorite wife, Aisha. Did she have a lover? That's the interesting topic that we are going to discuss today. And a few housekeeping rules before that. I think all of you are muted, but do type your questions in the notes section of Zoom. And if you're following this on either Facebook Live or Twitter Live or YouTube, go ahead and type your questions. I'll try to answer as many of those as I can towards the end. The plan I have is I'll talk for about 15 minutes or so. It's going to be a brief talk today and then open it up for questions and make sure that your questions are relevant to today's topic. So with this topic, the Prophet, his wife, her lover. Muhammad had a reputation for taking many wives and concubines. He had more than 20 women who had taken as wives or concubines. And even the Quran admits that his contemporaries criticized him for his unusual appetite for women. And one of such wives was Joveria. She had been captured as a war booty, and then she was distributed to one of the jihadis or soldiers who was on Muhammad's army. And then this person ransomed her for 400 dirham. And eventually she could not pay that. And Muhammad volunteered to pay that amount. And on one condition, that she also becomes a wife of Muhammad. She agreed to that. She didn't have much of a choice because she had been taken as a war booty. And then she could be distributed to anyone. Islam doesn't give any rights to non-believing women who are captured as war booty. And as a result, she had to agree with this condition put forth by Muhammad. So she becomes a wife of Muhammad, and then she is stunningly beautiful. Aisha, the favorite wife of Muhammad, first looks at Joveria, and this is her reaction. She says Joveria was so beautiful and charming that anyone who caught sight of her was captivated. I felt worried because I was sure that Muhammad would be carried away as soon as his eye fell on her. And so he was. And for those of you who are not aware, Aisha was the favorite wife of Muhammad and remained so almost towards the end of his life. And she was feeling jealous at the arrival of Joveria. And then on that particular occasion, this jealousy would manifest itself in very strange ways that would be very embarrassing to Muhammad. So on one occasion, Muhammad goes on a raid against some of the rivals, and he used to wear such raids. He used to wage such raids and wars against a lot of other tribes in Arabia. And on that occasion, Aisha was chosen by lots to accompany Muhammad. So typically, one or two of his wives were chosen by lots, and then in this case, Aisha accompanied him, and Joveria had also joined the same caravan. And during this raid, the army is camping at one of the on the desert. That's like hundreds of thousands of camels. So all of those are camping there. And then Aisha steps out to answer nature's call. Then she realizes all of a sudden. So this is the story told by the Hadiths. So she realizes all of a sudden that she has lost her necklace. It has fallen somewhere in the desert. So she goes searching for that. And by the time she returns, the entire caravan had left, and she was left stranded in the desert. Then a scout, his name was Safwan, he was a young man, and he was following the entire caravan at a certain distance, and he spots Aisha. Then he brings her back on his camel to Medina. And this led to a lot of rumors. There was a poet by name Hassan bin Thabit, and Hassan bin Thabit added his voice to a malicious rumor. So there was a gossip, and then he alleged that Aisha had committed adultery. And he was not the only one. One of the wives of Muhammad was Zainab, and her sister also started the same rumor, and a lot of them were spreading this rumor. And it was not without reason, because this entire story has a lot of holes in it. Number one, the entire army is made up of literally hundreds, sometimes even thousands of camels, a lot of soldiers and everyone. And if that entire army is decamping and if it is leaving, no matter how far away Aisha was, she would have noticed that and then she would have come back. That did not happen. And second, if the wife of the prophet was answering nature's call, she's not going to do it in the open. And obviously, they are going to set up some kind of an enclosure, temporary enclosure, and the soldiers will notice that and they would have come back. And she was not walking, she was being carried on a palanquin or a howdah. And in that case, those who were lifting the howdah would have checked it and they would have noticed that there was nobody inside this howdah. So they would not have just left. And even assuming, after all of these things, that the army had decamped and Aisha was left stranded, and Safwan came and then he brought her back on the camel, a single camel would travel much, much faster than the entire caravan. So he would have caught up with the caravan in the next stop and then rejoined. That did not happen either. So all of this led to the suspicion that Aisha had done something improper. She had committed adultery with Safwan. And remember that Aisha was a very young woman at that time. She was in her teens, and then Muhammad was a man in his mid 50s. So all of this led to the rumor. And the interesting part is Muhammad himself appears to have suspected Aisha because the first thing he did was to send Aisha away to her parents' place. She was banished. Then Muhammad called two of his associates and he asked them, what should we do with this? What should we do with Aisha? And one of them said, listen, divorce her, go get another wife. Okay, this was a very common thing in Islam. And he also suggested interrogating some of the maid servants of Aisha, and one of them was taken and beaten up, everything. And then she insisted, no, Aisha did nothing wrong. Then the other associate of Muhammad, to whom Muhammad had asked for advice, he instead said, listen, Abu Bakr's daughter, Aisha, would not have done anything improper. So please do not suspect her. So it looks like some of his followers and some of his associates were men of better caliber than Muhammad himself was. And in any case, Muhammad had already banished Aisha to her parents' place. Then he goes and then, this gossip is raging all over the place. And he does not know what to do with it. However, he waits for a month and after that a Quranic verse is revealed. And this Quranic verse says, this is verse number chapter 24, verse number 2 to 26. It talks about this episode or it alludes to that. And then the Quranic verse says, Aisha is innocent, she is without a blemish, and anyone who cast aspersions on her should be punished. Then Muhammad returns to her parents' place. And of course, before that, he also asks her, did you commit anything wrong? And then Aisha, of course, insists that she was innocent. And after the verse is revealed, he again comes back and then he informs Aisha that, Allah has cleared you. Allah has declared you innocent. And hence, you are no longer under investigation. You are no longer under suspicion. And when this happens, that's a very interesting reaction from Aisha. Her mother tells Aisha, now that Allah has cleared you, he has declared you innocent, go ahead and thank the Prophet. Aisha refuses. This is recounted by Bukhari in one of the hadiths, which the Muslims consider as an authentic hadith. And then in that hadith, Aisha says, I thank Allah for clearing my name. However, I will not thank Muhammad. So what does this episode mean to Muslims and what does it mean to everybody else? Okay, does it allow us a different way to look at Muhammad? Is there a way we can analyze this episode differently? Ali Dashti was a Persian scholar. He wrote a very celebrated book, 23 years, on the career of Prophet Muhammad. And then in that he proposes a very interesting hypothesis. He says, Aisha need not have committed adultery in the desert. However, the entire episode might have been created in collusion with Safwan because she was jealous. Okay, she already expressed the jealousy. I talked about it at the beginning. She found Joveria to be stunningly beautiful, and then she thought Joveria would become the cynosure of Muhammad. And Aisha was jealous of that, and then she very clearly articulates that. And in the days preceding the episode, this incident, Muhammad had spent his time with Joveria, and he had not spent his time with Aisha, and that should have aggravated the jealousy that Aisha had, and then she must have nurtured a lot of resentment towards Muhammad. And don't forget the fact that she was a very young woman and he was an aging man. He was in his mid to late 50s at the time. So all of these, Ali Dashti argues, should have led to a charade that Aisha enacted, in which she cast this aspersion, and I consider that to be a possibility. Okay, we do not know for certain. There might have been an incident of adultery, or she might have just enacted a charade to embarrass Muhammad. But what is even more interesting is the reaction of Muhammad. In the first place, Muhammad did not trust Aisha. Most of most of the Muslim apologists, when you talk to them, they will tell Muhammad was a great man. He treated his wives with utmost dignity. He did not beat them, etc. It's true that he did not beat his wives, okay, but that's not the only mark of a gentleman. A gentleman also knows that he should trust his wife, and especially if, in the case of Muhammad, Aisha is the favorite wife of Muhammad, and he should have trusted her. He did not. Instead, he suspected her. He sent her away to her parents' place, and then he even asked others. It was a marital affair, but then he asked his associates, his followers, what to do with this. And what if he had listened to the advice of one of them and divorced Aisha? That would have been a tragedy. So Muhammad falls far short of being a dignified gentleman in this case. And second, Muhammad does not. Why was this verse from Allah, this Quranic verse in chapter 22, why was it revealed more than a month later? Why was it not revealed right away? Because if it had been revealed right away, then Aisha would have been declared innocent. Those are the words of Allah. And then nobody would have spread the rumor, and Muhammad's reputation would not have been sullied, nor would have been Aisha's reputation sullied. Yet Muhammad waited for a month. Why? And this has been analyzed by a lot of people, including by Ali Dashti, and I have also written about that in the past. And one of the reasons is Muhammad actually suspected that Aisha had a sexual affair with Safwan. And if she had had an affair, and what if she became pregnant? Muhammad had not slept with her in the preceding days, in the days prior to this incident. And then if she becomes pregnant, then, and if a verse had been revealed declaring her innocent, that would have been disastrous to Muhammad. That would have cast doubts on every Quranic revelation. And as a result, Muhammad had to act out of compulsion. Because if he revealed a verse too soon, and if Aisha turns out to be pregnant, then Muhammad's prophetic career would have ended then and there. Nobody would have trusted him after that. On the other hand, if he waited for a month, and then if Aisha has her menses and she is not pregnant, then he can comfortably reveal the verse, and then she can be declared innocent. And of course, in the preceding, in the intervening days, a month or so, Muhammad had to face this embarrassment, and everybody was gossiping about that. And after a month, Muhammad got a Quranic revelation. So, in my opinion, Muhammad acted out of compulsion because he could not have revealed the verse too early, and he had to wait for a month, make sure that Aisha was not pregnant, and then reveal the verse. And interestingly, in the Hadiths and in the Quran, or in any of the Islamic seerah and other texts, we do not hear of this young man Safwan. Maybe he was killed. We do not know. So the Prophet, his wife, her lovers. What is the conclusion we can get out of that? Muhammad comes across as very human in this, in my opinion, because he is an old man who's married to a much younger, much attractive, much more vigorous woman. And then obviously he was facing difficulties. Okay, having multiple wives and taking care of every one of them is not easy, especially when you're really old. And then there was this rumor, there was this incident that happened, and then he did not rise to the occasion. He did not act as a gentleman. He did not act as someone who trusted his wife, and instead he suspected her. He fell. Then he sends her away to her parents' place. And once again, this is another reflection that he was not trying to sort the matter out within the marriage, and he was making it quite public by sending her away. And he was talking to his henchmen on what to do with Aisha. And finally, in the case of Aisha, her reaction is very telling. Okay, number one, she of course protests her innocence, but when she is declared innocent with a Quranic revelation, she is not rushing to thank Muhammad. In fact, she says she will not thank Muhammad. Why? Because she knows even if she had had an affair, she did not get pregnant, but even if she had an affair, there was nothing Muhammad could do about it. So she does not have to thank him, and then she can just thank Allah and she can move on. This is a very dysfunctional family. This is a dysfunctional marriage. And from this episode, the only lesson Muslims or anyone could learn is the Quran says Muhammad is a role model and every Muslim should emulate him. But the lesson for Muslims is don't emulate him. If ever there is a gossip about your wife having committed adultery, do not suspect her right away. Act better than Muhammad did. Thank you. I'm open to any questions. So the first question is waiting for you to do a talk on the scientific nature of Islam. Of course, I'll do that. There are a lot of Muslim apologists who claim that there are scientific miracles in the Quran, and none of that could have been known at the time. The arguments range from embryology to cosmology, everything. All of those are downright silly and rubbish. And of course, I'll come up with a series on that.
Hello, sir. This is Karthik from Chennai.
Oh, hi.
My question is, so if there is something good wherever, we can look for it, search for it and learn. But what is the point of finding, reading a whole complicated book and finding fault with it? We are not going to gain anything from it. So that's my understanding. So why are we even doing this exercise?
For the same reason you are attending this call, right? You are attending this speech. This is of interest to us. Why is it of interest to us? Because any text, even if it has been written 1300 years ago, should be of intellectual curiosity to us, and then we should be looking at it and we should be analyzing that. So I think that's a very human nature. Then number two, Islam is not a thing of the past. It's not a historical relic. Okay, it's a religion followed by 1.8 billion people. And then it is a religion which proselytizes. And then Islamic jihad is a reality. And a lot of Muslims do hold Muhammad in very high regard. And the Quran itself teaches that Muhammad is the perfect role model and Muslims should emulate him. So with all of this being the case, that's why we have the Sharia law. There's a clamoring for Sharia law in most of the Muslim countries. And then even in India, polygamy and other things exist because those are all in the Sharia and those things have been sanctified by Muhammad. So it is perfectly legitimate for us to examine the conduct of Muhammad and then to tell the world, to tell the Muslims, by the way, he cannot be a perfect role model because of these reasons.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. Oh, there are a bunch of other
Actually,
questions.
I knew all this. I just I didn't have words to express them. This is very clear now, sir.
Yeah, no worries.
Follow
Most
you
welcome.
whenever you speak and in Facebook, everywhere. Thank you very much, sir.
Absolutely. Okay. Okay, apparently there is some reflection on my glasses. Is it still there?
It's good now.
Okay, the next question is it true that women can be stoned for adultery? Yes, the answer is yes. And then I talked about that in the speech last week. Go back and you can watch the recording. It's called, what is the title? Is the Quran the perfect instruction manual? Talk about that. I discussed the same question in that discussion. Please go ahead and watch that. Any other questions?
What about parallels to the episode where Sri Ram rescues Sita from Lanka and he suspects her and then has her go through the Agni Pariksha.
So he does not suspect her, right? So,
Yeah.
so here is the yeah, I got your question. So let me answer that. So he does not suspect her. So the first thing, this is beautifully answered by Sadhguru Jaggi Vasudev in one of the Q&A. So I'm just going to paraphrase his response because I thought that was the best response. Okay, so there are two things in consideration here. Number one, Sita is abducted, okay, by Ravana, and she's taken to Sri Lanka. Now, Rama is the heir to the kingdom. He's a prince, and he is going to be the next king when the Vanavasa is complete. And then he could have just gone ahead and married somebody, okay, and ignored and moved on. He did not do that. He pines for his wife, okay, and then he follows her and then goes all the way, travels thousands of kilometers. He stands up a new army, okay, gets the Vanaras and others, and then he stands up a new army, and then he goes and he fights and risks the life of his own brother and risks his own life to bring her back. Okay, this is the direct opposite of somebody who is careless and somebody who is suspecting his wife. Here is a man who loves his wife, who pines for his wife, and who is willing to risk everything and build an army from scratch, go and fight and bring her back. Number two, when he brings her back, nowhere in the Valmiki Ramayana or nowhere in Kamba Ramayana or any other Ramayana does Rama say he suspects Sita. It's quite the opposite. The Agni Pariksha is done to convince the rest of the world. Okay, so it is a literary motive, and I do not take all of these things as historical episodes, but it's a literary motive where an Agni Pariksha is carried out to convince the rest of the world that Sita is without a blemish. This is number two. Then Rama does not suspect. That's why they go ahead, they start living together, and then they have two children, Lava and Kusha. Okay, so this is once again the exact opposite of a person who would have suspected his wife and treated her in a less than gentlemanly way. And then what happens is, then there is a gossip. Okay, there is a washerman and his wife. They gossip about the king taking his wife back, even though she had been held a captive by Ravana. Rama could have just ignored and moved on. Okay, but Rama, as a king, is not only accountable, is not only answerable to his family, to his wife and his children, but he is also, sorry, at the time, they have not had the children. Sita is pregnant. Okay, so then he could have just ignored and he could have continued his comfortable life in the palace. He does not do that because a king is answerable to every subject in his kingdom. Okay, that's the reason a king is also known as Dharma Pravartaka. Okay, so he upholds Dharma by taking care of everyone's concerns. So today, contrast that with today, whether it's the United States, whether it is China, India, any other country, how many of us can even hope to get an audition with the prime minister, with the president, with the chief minister, or anyone? We cannot. And most of them, our opinions don't even matter. But here is a king, and he is considered an avatara by the Hindus, but he is addressing the concerns of some of his meekest subjects, in this case, a washerman. So this answer, this is a quick paraphrase of the answer that Jaggi Vasudev had given. So I don't think the two incidents are the same because Rama observes Ekapatni Vrata, okay, and then he is not running after women, unlike Muhammad, who did that. And then number two, when this episode happens, the episode of Agni Pariksha is only a literary motive, and Rama does not suspect her. That's why they live together, and then she becomes pregnant. Okay, so, and third, it is an episode that's written to demonstrate that a king is answerable to the meekest of his subjects. And on the other hand, a direct reading of the Quran and the Hadiths tell you that Muhammad suspected his wife. He was a womanizer. He went after multiple women. And then when his youngest wife was accused of committing adultery, he suspected that, and he made a public show of that, and he sent her away, and then finally revealed a Quranic verse a month later after making sure that she had not become pregnant. It's not the same. So next question is how to make the Muslims understand that people who have such powers, like sages and sannyasis, be so materialistic with such high karma. how to make it clear that only renunciate will have Bhagavan speak to them and not some. I do not know about that. Okay, so first of all, I do not know if a God exists, and number two, if a God exists, I do not know if he will only, or if he or she will only talk to a sannyasi or renunciate, and I also do not know whether it straight away rules out someone because that person had a higher sexual appetite. Okay, because Hinduism, for example, recognizes different types of vivaha. Okay, there are 8 of them recognized. There are probably more of those, and some of those do not have the same rigors, what we would call, of observing vrata, having only one wife, one spouse, and all of these things. So I'm not entirely sure of that. And I am also not sure that Muhammad really had a very high appetite. Okay, the reason being, there are episodes in the hadiths that claim that Muhammad had the strength of 30 men. Okay, so he had the sexual libido of 30 men. But there are also other hadiths where Aisha herself tells that Muhammad often imagined having sex with his wives when he had not. So that being the case, I think it's equally possible to argue that Muhammad did suffer from some kind of a sexual dysfunction, and then the story of him having a very, very strong libido were invented to just cover up for them. So that's quite a possibility. So that's my answer to your question. So the next question, your thoughts on Taharush, is it really Islamic or just something done by mobs? Okay, so Taharush was, for example, observed in Egypt. Okay, I think it was 2 or 3 years ago, 4 years ago, and so I'm planning to do a separate episode on this. So please wait for me on that. But it is there in Islam. Okay, it's an Islamic practice. Okay, observed in many countries that are Islamic. But I'll make a separate episode on that. Next questions. Polygamy is not unique to Islam. Sure. And Krishna had multiple wives. Kartikeya had multiple wives. Of course, yes. Polygamy is not unique to Islam. And a lot of ancient societies had polygamy. But we don't even have to go to ancient societies. If you went 40, 50 years, even in India, a lot of wealthy people and a lot of politicians and others, they had multiple wives. So yes, polygamy is not unique to Islam. But what is the difference? Okay, in Islam, it is sanctified in the Quran, it is sanctified in the Islamic Sharia and all of the jurisprudence. And Muhammad himself had multiple wives. More importantly, he had multiple concubines. In Islam, it's called what your right hand possesses. Okay, that means if you can capture a non-Muslim woman, a kafir woman, then you can take her as a concubine. She's a sex slave. And this is sanctified in the Quran. And the Quran also says Muhammad is the perfect role model. All Muslims for all time should emulate him. So a Muslim today would insist on retaining polygamy laws, retaining sexual slavery, because that is projected as a model for Muslims to follow for all times. That's not the case with all the other religions. I think that's the fundamental difference between the two. Any other question?
I also had a question about Jesus. So thinking about Jesus, it seems that he comes across as the best among the lot. Right? This is just for argument's sake, right? Like here is a guy who's a celibate. So he's not even a womanizer by statute of the humanity. And when he's actually confronted with the situation where people are trying to stone a prostitute, he actually saves her and says that, let he who has not sinned cast the first stone. I mean, normally if a person is celibate, he would turn on women, and become misogynist and say, okay, just kill her. So what are your thoughts about that?
How do you know the woman committed adultery in the first place? Okay, so I have written an extensive article on this. It's available online. It's on India Fact. I think it's called The Adulteress and the Misogyny of Jesus, something like that. Okay, so search for the words adulteress, misogyny, and Jesus, and you'll find it. So what happens is, so here is what is happening. Okay, so I'll have to give a slightly detailed answer, but then let me do that. Let me summarize it as well as I can. Okay, so here is an episode. A mob is dragging a woman, okay, to stone her to death on charges of adultery. So whether she committed adultery or not, we do not know. Okay. And Jesus is sitting with some of his disciples out there. Okay. So 12, I presume, or 13. Okay. And then he is sitting there, and then the mob comes to him. The first thing they do is they ask him. So all of this is in the Bible, right? So I put all the references in the essay when you search for that. So the mob comes to Jesus and asks him, what should we do with this woman? Okay. So should we let her go? Should we stone her to death? Okay. So what does it mean? Why are they coming and asking Jesus even that question? Because he is a person of some standing. So his voice, his opinions count. So they come and ask him. It could be also a loaded question. That's what the Christian apologists claim. The loaded question being, if he says, "Oh, stone her to death," then he'll be accused of being cruel. On the other hand, if he says, "Let go the woman," then he'll be accused of not following the biblical law. The biblical law clearly mandates that the punishment for adultery, stoning to death. And Jesus himself in Matthew 5:17 vows that he is come not to abrogate any of the laws of the Bible, but to fulfill every one of them until the last word. Okay. So it could be a loaded question, but that's where the mettle of a man is tested. So they come to Jesus and ask him the question, okay, what do you do? What do we do with this woman? First of all, if you had 12 people uh, who are your disciples and you are sitting there, or 13 people, and then a woman is being dragged, you won't wait till somebody approaches you. You will go and try to do your best to save that woman. He does not do that. Okay. Instead, he is sitting there, and the mob comes to him. They ask him, "What do we do with this woman?" And then Jesus does not reply. He's doodling on the ground. Okay. They repeat the question. They repeat the question. Then he finally answers, "He who is without a sin cast the first stone." A lot of Christians think this is a brilliant answer, okay, and a lot of Hindus too, because they have not critically examined these passages, think it's a brilliant answer. It's not, okay. What kind of people would be stoning a woman to death? These are sociopaths, sometimes even psychopaths. These are people without empathy. These are people who are moralistic, okay. They think they are morally correct and the other people are immoral, and then they want to judge them. And then these are fundamentalists, these are fanatics, okay. They take scripture literally, okay, and then they follow it to the last word. And then, since the scripture says stone an adulteress to death, these people have taken a moral high ground, and then they consider this woman to be immoral because she's an adulteress. And then these people lack empathy. These people lack. These are sociopaths. These are psychopaths. They would. Those are the people who would be stoning a woman to death in a public orgy. Now, what kind of justice is that which enters judgment to self-introspection of sociopaths, people without empathy, psychopaths, and mobs? And what if one of them had said, "Oh, by the way, I am without a sin. Okay, I am moralistic. So let me throw the first stone." That woman would have died. It so happens that on that particular occasion, the mob turned out to be better than Jesus. Jesus was instigating them. He was telling, "Whoever among you is without a sin, cast the first stone." And every one of them could have thought they are without sin and done that. Luckily, it turned out, it was a stroke of luck, that the mob turned out to be of better caliber than Jesus. They said, "Wait a minute, I might have committed some sin." They introspected, that was just a chance occurrence. So Jesus falls far below the expectation we would have of a decent human being. Okay. And then there are a lot of other verses. There was a speech I gave yesterday, which I think should be getting published just before Christmas. What every Hindu should know about Christianity. There I talk about a lot of other problems with Christianity, including with the character of Jesus, because he's a rabid racist and all the other things. And just because he was not a womanizer does not make him a great person, because there's something strange too. In Judaism, Jesus was born a Jew. In Judaism, a man always got married. Celibacy was not an option. And Jesus did not marry. So did he suffer from some kind of a sexual dysfunction? Is that why he was not after women? We do not know the answer. That's quite a possibility. And that's been the topic of a lot of studies from neuroscience, neuropsychiatry, and psychiatry. A couple of those very important studies are one from Harvard Medical School by the faculty members of Harvard Medical School, that was published some 8 or 9 years ago, and the other one by Coinrod Ells and Herman Sommers on the psychology of prophetism. So look up those two references and also read up my article. No, I don't think Jesus is by any means a role model, and I think he's no better than Muhammad, just that they are all guilty of different sets of crimes. Next one. So if that woman, if Aisha's competitor was so beautiful, then does it mean burqa and parda was not used during that time? That's correct. So, hijab is introduced in the Quran midway through. Okay, so I had to look up exactly when it was done, but my guess is it was done in his 23 years of prophetic career. It happened somewhere past the middle, right? Somewhere past 26, 27 years of 17, 18 years of the prophetic career. That's what I recall from memory, but I have to look up the exact time. But yes, there was a time when the hijab was introduced, and before that, women weren't covered. Okay. Again, I have to qualify the statement. Some of the women, especially those who are from the noble families, might have covered themselves because this practice comes from Persia. Okay, the Persian royalty, they covered their women, and the same was even true of some of the Byzantine royalty, Byzantine noble people. They covered their women. So I think to some extent that would have been imitated even in Arabia around that period. So some of the noble women might have covered themselves, but in this case, I don't think they were covered, mainly because Juwayriya was brought as a captive. Okay, so she was not covering herself before she married Muhammad, and then she's brought in, and then she's distributed to all the other soldiers. Okay, as if women are commodities, they are distributed, and then they are ransomed, paid for. Muhammad pays 400 dirham, and then takes possession of her. So all of this happened. It's reasonable to say that she was not covered. What's Muhammad's secret? With such a weak mind and self-doubt, managed to influence the world for 14th centuries. Well, these things happen, right? So I consider, I think it was Mark Twain who said, the religion was born when the first charlatan met the first useful idiot. Okay, so a lot of times, charlatan can easily convince people who are gullible and who are credulous, and that's what happened, I think, in this case. But also, religion spread violently. So Islam spread by sword, and once they attained a certain critical mass, they imposed Islam by sword. So there was no question of disagreeing. And then, for example, take India, temples were demolished, and the Buddhist monasteries were demolished in Pakistan and Afghanistan, all those places, and Islam was imposed on the people. And when you can successfully do that for a generation or two, then the new generation that's born is not going to examine this critically, and then they will go with the perception that, hey, Islam should be correct, this is a revelation from God, because their entire worldview has been altered. So the next question. It appears that the Saudi king is doing the right thing, and he has just banned Tablighi Jamaat. And do you believe only 25% of the Muslims are hardcore fundamentalists and most are reasonable? Yeah, I think the first question is, I think the Saudi king is what is his name, Mohammed bin, he's doing a really good job, right? So banning Tablighi Jamaat is a good thing, and I think he also opened up yoga and other things in Saudi Arabia. I think those things will help a lot of Muslims to experience uh, more of wisdom traditions and more of Hinduism and other things, and hopefully they will come out of that. But I think he's making taking the right initiatives. And only 25% of Muslims are hardcore fundamentalists. Well, I think the important question here is that there are 1.8 billion Muslims on this planet. Okay, so 25% of that would still be 450 million Muslims. Okay, whatever that number is, whatever the percentage is. So, but this is where we should pay attention to Majid Nawaz. Okay, Majid Nawaz makes a very interesting observation that most of the Muslims are very conservative people. Okay, so when you look at the spectrum, on the one extreme of the spectrum, you have the jihadis, who will blow themselves up and who will fly their planes, and then who will stone women to death and all of these things, right? So they are at one extreme. Okay, then you have conservative Muslims, okay, who actually support all these things, who follow the Sharia, who clamor for Sharia. And for example, if you take UK, I think something like a fourth of the Muslims there want Sharia law. But when you move to Muslim countries like Pakistan, something like 84 or 85% of the Muslims want the Sharia law. Okay, so in other words, a vast majority of Muslims are extremely conservative. Okay, and then they do get offended with blasphemy. Okay, if you blaspheme Prophet Muhammad, then they get seriously offended. The only response from them is, well, we don't support violence, but you should not have insulted Prophet Muhammad like this. Okay, so the challenge we are having is there are no liberal Muslims. Okay, because there are few ex-Muslims. Okay, when a Muslim starts examining his religion, examining the Quran, examining the Hadiths, examining the conduct of Muhammad, everything, they eventually end up giving up Islam. Okay, they become ex-Muslims. But when somebody becomes an ex-Muslim, he or she is shunned by the rest of the Muslim community. So, in other words, what we are seeing is um, most of the Muslims are very, very conservative people, and then most of them do support to varying degrees. Some of them support the violence, and some of them don't support violence, but then they do support that they support the premise that one cannot blaspheme the Quran or Muhammad or anyone, right? Like just a week ago, a 40-plus-year-old man in Pakistan was stoned to death. No, sorry, he was beaten up, lynched first, and then burnt alive by a Muslim mob. He was a factory manager. All he did was somebody had put up a poster next to his office wall. He went and tore it up. Okay, apparently that poster had a couple of Quranic verses printed on it. I do not know whether this guy had even he could even understand Urdu and understand or Arabic script, whatever it was printed in. I seriously doubt that. But in that case, the mob immediately ran a campaign on social media, and within hours he was lynched and he was burnt alive and he was killed. Okay, and this should tell us something, right? And there is no outrage in Pakistan. Okay, that why this happened, and so what? Why can we not blaspheme the Quran, or why can we not blaspheme Muhammad or anything? So most people are keeping quiet. So this is the problem. Okay, vast majority of Muslims are very conservative, and then they have a system where the preachers in the Friday sermons do introduce a lot of toxicity, and then they are spreading jihad and similar idea, and so is not so insignificant number of Muslims end up becoming jihadis. So the next question is, you'll cover the importance of Kaaba. Yes, I will do that. In fact, Mecca is Mecca where Masjid al-Haram is located. Okay, the word used for Kaaba is part of Masjid al-Haram. Okay, so, and then there's a new thesis that has come out, which based on the Qibla direction, which is actually a very convincing thesis, which proposes that it was not Mecca, but Petra in Jordan, which was the center of Islam, and Kaaba was originally located there. And we know that to some extent, because even according to the Islamic accounts, one of the caliphs actually destroys the original shrine, and he takes the stone, the black stone, and he takes it to a new location. So I'll talk about that in a future episode. Have you read the Hadith and the Quran, and have you analyzed it? The answer is yes, and that's why I'm conducting such speeches. And then is there anywhere in the world reformation of Islam is going on? Well, there are a few people who are attempting that. Okay, more power to them. Okay, so Rajiv Malhotra has conducted a lot of discussions with Imam Tawhidi, and his slogan has been, do you follow the Islam of Allah or the Islam of Mullah? Okay, so then there is another attempt by Majid Nawaz. Majid Nawaz talks about interpreting, he used to be a jihadi earlier, and then radical, and then he became more of what you can call a moderate Muslim. He talks about reforming Islam, and then he has got some very good ideas. And there are some very interesting conversations with Majid Nawaz and Sam Harris. So then in India, Maulana Wahiduddin Khan, he passed away a few years ago, and he took a very similar stance. And in fact, he said, you should hand over Ram Janmabhoomi to the Hindus. And then he has been trying to interpret Islam. He tried to interpret Islam differently. I think there are some of those efforts going on, although I am skeptical of the outcome. Okay, because Islam is a terrible religion. Okay, the Quran is terrible. Okay, the Hadiths are terrible. The Sharia is terrible. Okay, and how much can you give a Botox like makeover to these kind of teachings, and how can you make it better? Okay, in my opinion, it's a lot easier to. I mean, it's like trying to argue that we'll take Nazism and then we'll make it somewhat better. We'll reform it. Why? Okay. Why don't you just let go of that and then embrace something better than Islam. That's my preference. But all power to those who want to do that, because the truth is, at the end of the day, there are 1.7 or 1.8 billion Muslims on this planet. And I do recognize that criticism and attack is not the only way to tackle this. There are other ways to do that too. No more questions? Then I think we can wrap up. Thank you, everyone. And we'll be publishing the video very, very shortly. Thank you.